All right, welcome back to another episode of How I Franchise This. Today, I am joined by Josh Emison. Josh has an incredible story of leadership, getting into the franchise space, and in a number of ways, helping people find the right franchise himself, working with other franchise brands, but also being a franchisee himself. I'm going to turn it over to Josh to introduce himself and to share which brand he is currently a franchise partner with.
Yeah, so Josh Emison, I am in Denver, and if you can't see, right, I'm wearing a bright pink shirt. So the franchise that I own 3 territories of Tippi Toes Dance, and all my buddies back from my Marine Corps days laugh when they see me in pink, and I tell them that I have a company that teaches 4-year-olds how to dance.
I was actually just going to go there
Yeah.
and ask you. I was like, yeah, your buddies from the military days have to give you a little bit of teasing and poking about that. But let's talk about that. I mean, what was life like growing up, and how did you end up in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, my dad was in the Navy, and I was on a base in Puerto Rico on 9/11. And so I was actually on the base when the Twin Towers were hit. It's so crazy, there's kids that I meet now who are weren't even alive, right, when it happened. And it was a big part of my life. And after that, we did all of our shopping. We lived off the base, but we did all of our shopping. I went to school on the base, all the normal things. And the day before, everybody was cool, everything was chill. And then the day after, there was a Humvee with a 50 cal pointed at the cars that were coming on the base. And as a kid, you're like, what is happening? Things just changed. And so I knew that I wanted to follow my dad into the military. I thought I was going to go to the Navy. I went to the Naval Academy. 20% of people who graduate from there can go to the Marine Corps. I wanted to join the fight, and I thought the Marine Corps would be the best way to do that. So I also just loved the Marine officers that I met during my time at the Academy. So I followed into there. I was an infantry officer. The wars were winding down by the time I got out of training, so I did 2 non-combat deployments. Woe is me. I spent time in Spain and Japan and Jordan, right? So I can't complain too much because I saw some pretty beautiful places while I was in the Marine Corps.
And you so the Naval Academy is one of the military schools, right? Is it in Annapolis?
In Annapolis, yeah. So it's like the Navy version of West Point, yeah.
Yep. And then there's that's not the Citadel.
The Air Force Academy is in, it's in Colorado Springs.
Colorado Springs?
Yep.
That's right.
Yep. And then there's the Merchant Marine Academy and the Coast Guard Academy are up in the Northeast.
Okay. And you have to get letters written from senators and Congress men and women, right, to go, isn't that?
Yeah. Most people do. I was on the wait list, and so that endorsement went to somebody else. And 2 weeks before, because my dad was in the Navy, if what they'll do is if they want you, they'll get the vice president to endorse you. And so they called me 2 weeks before, and they're like, "Hey, do you still want to come to the Naval Academy?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And 2 weeks later, I was getting yelled at during our plebe summer. So.
Because I had applied to go to the Air Force Academy, actually. I remember having to get the letters written by state senators. And then I think I pulled my application out because I started to think about this. And I think the Air Force Academy, compared to the other ones, had an 8-year commitment post-college versus the other ones, was it 4 or 6?
No, so everyone has 5. But if you became a pilot, your commitment doesn't start until after flight school, and that's where you hit the 8 years. So
got it. Okay, so I remember seeing that, and I remember your first summer after your freshman year was a week long, and they took your phone away and no contact with home and all this. I was like, I don't know if I'm signing up for this or not.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, so you have this incredible experience. You're following kind of some of your family's footsteps. You're committed to supporting your country in this way. I mean, what an incredible story, and thank you for that commitment, for our country. What did that experience teach you about, I don't know, leadership, and how did it shape, I guess, some of your kind of viewpoints on what you did after the military? I mean, what were some of those kind of critical core perspectives and kind of mental shapings that happened during that experience?
Yeah. I mean, it's really shaped, totally who I am, right, between the academy and my times in the Marine Corps. And I think one thing is definitely kind of the way you shape your leadership and philosophy, right? People don't think it, but reading is a really big part of being an officer in the military. Philosophy is a big part of it, right? Doing the right thing under stressors. And then, how do you treat other people, right? How do you respect other people? We get 18-year-olds who are, you know, some of them barely graduated high school, right? And these guys turn into just, they're people that you trust your life with, right? So you learn to really appreciate, I think, the people who work for you, right? You learn that if you train them well, you can trust them to the nth degree. And so I think how that carries forward now is a big thing for me is like just treat our employees right, um, respect them right, train them like we train. I've spent a lot of time training our salespeople. My wife's kind of the GM, so she spends all the time with the teachers and all that stuff. But after I've gone more in the sales path right through my career. So I've really focused on training and being there for calls and listening probably more than I needed to because I know, okay, well, let me just invest this time and the money and whatever it takes to train them, and they'll do amazing things, right? And you just
Hmm.
have to believe in them before they believe in themselves in a lot of these cases.
Yeah, I mean, some of the franchisees that I've interacted with and have met that had prior military experience, I mean, it is almost the perfect, fit in a lot of ways because there's systems and there's structure that comes with franchising versus an independent, the operated and owned business. I mean, those still exist there, but franchising definitely has a lot of it out of the gate. But there's also that like planned chaos as well. Like there's still the entrepreneurial element where like no matter what you do, like someone's going to call out or a customer's going to have this thing, and there's some of that chaos that I think also exists in combat and in the military where you can plan for everything, but eventually deviations are going to happen, chaos is going to ensue, and you have to be ready to adapt. And that's what I think veterans make such good business operators and franchisees specifically. And it sounds like a lot of those lessons that you experienced in the Marine Corps also carried over. I'm curious, when did the idea for you owning a business first start to appeal to you? Has this gone back to pre-military? Was it in military? Was it after military days? Like what sparked the appeal to become a business owner and an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So I don't think when I was before the military, I like was thinking of myself as a business owner, but I was the guy who was walking around knocking on doors and being like, "What can I do for you to make some money?" I walked dogs, I cleaned pools, I pulled weeds, I babysat people's kids, anything that I could do. Right? I was like, because I was very focused on sports and I was very focused on school, and so I had to do things that I could fit in around that. And getting a job just wasn't going to do that, right? Because I had to show up when they told me to, and I had to make the whatever dollar amount they felt like I could make, right? With these things, I could charge whatever I felt like charging. And so I didn't really think of it as a business. I was just out hustling. Um, and then you get into the military and, you appreciate things, but, um, after a while, right, we all get paid the same no matter how hard we work or how well we do. And, there's no war, so it's like we're just doing things that felt kind of like to do it. And I was like, screw this. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to figure out something by myself, because I know I can work hard enough. I know I'm smart enough. There's lots of business owners out there. I don't want to be part of another, million man organization. Yeah, I just don't want to be a part of that. I want to be the one leading the charge.
Hmm. And when you made that decision, was it always going to be, was franchising immediately top of mind? And I guess, why did you choose franchising over doing something from scratch?
Yeah, this was this is a crazy story. Um, so after I got out of the Marine Corps, I actually went to China for 6 months to learn Mandarin and Kung Fu. Um, I had like saved up a ton of money, and I loved Jackie Chan growing up, and I loved martial arts. I boxed intramurals, and I fought jujitsu on the club team when I was at the Naval Academy, and then I fought Muay Thai when I was in the Marine Corps, But I'd never done kung fu, and I grew up watching these movies, and so I just like went. And I come back, and I had a job to be a teacher in Miami. I was supposed to go through this training, and my folks were in Central Florida, and so I went home in late November of 2019, right? And I was like, hey guys, I'm gonna move to Miami in January. Can I stay with you guys for a month? That was the plan, right? Well, then COVID hits, and my housing and everything, like my pay, was all supposed to start when I moved, right? And obviously they're like, you can't move down here, and we're not going to pay you. So I like turned to my folks, and I was like, can I stay for a while? It was crazy. And so all the training was remote, and I was like, screw this, like I'm gonna have a business, right? Teachers don't work for 3 months out of the year, and school's like from 8 to 2 or something ridiculous. So I'll start a business, and so I just started Googling like how to start a business, and I found franchising. A franchise broker reached out to me, and he gave me a bunch of options that were terrible, right? And it's like, oh, I do this like a few days out of the month. He just happened to buy my name from like the lead network that I happened to submit my name to. I didn't realize it was a way to get leads at the time. I thought I was going to get like real information, And I was like, dude, these businesses suck. Like I don't want to. One was like pouring concrete. I'm like, I'm white with red hair, and I'm in Florida. Like, what do you think is going to happen if I'm pouring concrete all day? Like, I'll die. And like, just these other, they don't make any money. It was just, anyway. So I was like, I'm not doing this. And he's like, oh, well, you could be a franchise broker. And I was like, okay. So I became a franchise broker, and I was like, I still know what I'm doing. And so I read like 12 books on franchising and business in general. And then I worked underneath a franchise broker who used to be a franchisor. Right? This guy, he lived in Florida. He'd been around for a really long time. So I worked under him for like 6 or 7 months. And then I went out on my own. And then I left that. I had a couple people working for me. And I started a tech company. And I raised money. And I was raising my second round. I had a lot committed. And FTX goes under, and it was a blockchain company. So all of our investors pull out. And I literally lost like $250,000 in like a span of like 6 days, right? Because that's how much I had put into the business. But I was banking on closing this round, which was almost closed. And literally within 6 days, everybody calls me and says I'm out. And that was it. I was living off.
What was the business? It was a crypto business. What? Yeah.
No. We were using the blockchain to fractionalize commercial real estate debt, so that way we could sell $100 shares to an average person, right? So we were basically giving access to the average person, private credit, which is like the big thing now, right? We were way ahead of that, and we were doing it permissionless. Anyway, there's a lot of benefits doing it with the blockchain, and that was it. Boof, gone. All my money gone. I was living on loans. I'm now in debt. I thought I was about to be a millionaire, and it all went away, right? So I'm like, this is nuts. You know what is like steady? Franchising, right? I'm never going through another thing like that ever again. So I went and I worked franchise sales for a franchise sales organization. And the whole time, all I was doing was working to get to the point where I had enough money to own a franchise, right? Because I still didn't want to work for other people, but you can't just like start a franchise with no money, right? Negative money at that point, right? So I worked for this company, and I learned a lot about franchising. I sold franchises. During that time period, I met my wife, my lovely wife. And so she was a pediatric nurse, right? So it was so really this franchise, because I was supposed to keep my job, and that was a whole nother story. I don't think I want to go into, but that was a ridiculous thing, and I lost my job after we had bought the franchise. But whatever, I was now a franchise owner, which is honestly all I wanted. So I was happy. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got very circuitously to this. But I'm glad I did, because I do believe in franchising.
I'm just really curious. I'm sure others too. Is like, how did you go from, so you were working with this like kind of franchise broker, franchisor person in Florida, and then all of a sudden you went to this like venture-backed blockchain company. What's the gap? How did you bridge that gap?
Yeah. So, I guess I took a pretty long in-depth course on real estate. At the same time, I was also, if it's not, I don't have a life. I just like sit around and read things and like learn stuff, right? And like work out. Like that's all I like to do. And so I also got really, really deep into blockchain where I was speaking at events, just because I'd go to these things and people would, liked what I was saying. I was making money investing in crypto because I understood it, right? And so I met these guys who had started other venture-backed companies, brought them on as partners. I made some dumb decisions with how that was structured and who was paying who, and things that first-time business owners, without good mentors. I had some, but they came too late, and so I didn't trust them fully, and they told me not to do it, and I should have listened to them, right? So there's a lot of lessons learned in those days, but basically I just learned so much in a space that was brand new that it was easy to make a name for yourself.
Yep. Well, yeah, and like you said, you had the knowledge, you're getting your name out there, speaking. That's a really cool story. I mean, it sounds like you've always kept kind of some of these options open and have what people would call creating your own luck by staying around the hoop and being in the game and getting your name out there. That's awesome.
You just got to stay in the game. That's it.
100%. Okay, so you're staying in the game. You try this blockchain business. You have that outcome there, and then you get back into franchising. You're having you're doing franchise sales. Then you make the move. You get your franchise. How did you land on Tippi Toes? Like, of all the 4,000 plus brands that are out there, like, how did this one come across your radar? How did you diligence? How did you find the right fit?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a little easier for me because like the organization I worked for had like 30 brands that they sold, and I had the inside kind of like baseball on those 30 brands, right? So I was like, okay, let me pick something from here. My wife was gonna run it. I knew that, right? Because I was gonna keep this job, and she was gonna leave being a pediatric nurse. She'd done it for 10 years. Was a great nurse, but you hear from the people all the time they just burn out in that profession, right? Which is kind of what happened. So I'm like, okay, well, let's find a good franchise for you. I wanted simple. She'd never been in business before. I wanted something that played to her strengths, and she's like amazing with kids. Kids just love her, right? I wanted something that had been around for a long time. Tippi Toes has been around for, I think it's like 28 years now. I think it was 25 years when I bought it, and it's been 2 years, so like 27 years. I wanted something where I knew the owner was in it for the long haul, and this has been the same owner this entire time. She's after the experience with my partners, right? I wanted someone that I knew would they'd shoot themselves in their foot before they did something to hurt their franchisees, and that's her, right? She would never do something to hurt the franchisees, and so there was just a large amount of trust. I knew it's never going to scale to $10 million, right? It's like some of these franchises will. But it was a very good starter business, very low to get going, very high margins. It fit the bill for my wife, who was brand new. And we were like, okay, of all the brands that we sell, this is the best fit. It ticks most of the boxes. You're never going to get something that's perfect. And so, we did it.
What was the moment you and your wife were like, this is it, we're doing it? Was there a conversation? Was it seeing a class? Was it confirmation day or discovery day? What was the moment that you and your wife inevitably had that moment where you looked at each other and you could just, we're doing this?
So we knew we were going to do a franchise, right? She basically made the decision. What's funny is she could repeat my sales calls for me. She had heard them so many times, right? And so she got educated about franchising. And she's like, okay, I want to do this. And I said, okay. And I brought her a couple options. She's like, well, I kind of like this one. And we went through it. And by the time I did the numbers and I spoke to the franchisees and I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure, it's kids dance, right? It's not a super sophisticated bunch of franchisees. And I'm like, do you think you're as capable as the people we're talking to? She's like, yeah, I do. I'm like, we are hearing how much money they're making. Is that okay with you? Yeah, it is. Okay. So then, let's do it. Do you think you're gonna have fun every day? She, for the most part, she's like, yeah, I do think that. And that's big too, right? You can't hate your life. It doesn't matter how much money you're making. You'll just flame out. So you have to have fun too.
Yeah. When we have people come through, it's like, I had one guy ask me, he's like, just show me the brand that I'm going to make the most money in. And I was like, I don't know if that's the best way to approach it, but we can, we can help filter and, look at things like that. But people really are doing this for so many different reasons, not just franchising, but business ownership. It could be, challenge and fulfillment. It could be a legacy for your kids. It could be just you're sick of your 9 to 5 and want more control and ownership. There's so many different reasons, and it's not just as simple as like, I just want to, print money and make as much money as I possibly can. I mean, that's one of the reasons for sure, but it's got to be about more than that, to your point, because 3 years in, 5 years in, 10 years in, I mean, it's your life. You're spending a ton of hours involved, whether you have a GM or not. Like, it's still part of, your identity to a degree in your life, and you got to find that thing that you can resonate with and get behind. It sounds like you and your wife, had that alignment, did the diligence, found the right fit, for you guys and your unique situation, your set of goals. So I guess my next question for you guys is: you guys are doing that research, you find the right brand, you're going all in, you push the chips in. What was it like after you signed the franchise agreement and now you're business owners together, you're doing this thing? What were the first few months like after signing the franchise agreement?
Yeah, so, I've kind of gone through this song and dance, right, of like starting a business. And I believed in franchising. So I was like, okay, we go to training, and whatever the franchisor tells us to do, go do that, right? Like, it's pretty simple. And what did the franchisor say? Go sell, right? So my wife would come home and eat lunch, and I'm like, go out, go sell more, right? The franchisor said to sell all day, so go sell more. And she's like, oh, damn, okay. And we got a bunch of schools. And then it's like, well, what do you do when you get schools? You teach, you learn the choreography and you teach the classes. So she did that. Okay, well, now we have a bunch of classes. Well, now you put, $100 on Indeed and you copy and paste this thing and you hire somebody and train them, and now they teach and you go sell more. It's like, it's not that hard. You know what I mean? You just do what the franchisor tells you, and
Yeah.
don't make it any harder than it has to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes people do overcomplicate things and they try to put their own like sizzle on it, and there's a time and a place for that, but you joined a franchise for a reason. There's a playbook, there's things that have been proven out, there's systems, and yes, there's margin for that deviation and kind of entrepreneurial creativity and spirit, but for the most part, to your point, if you follow the bread and butter and what's been working well religiously, then things will fall into place and they'll work. And
Yeah,
it's just
it's
a
not
matter
just
of, I think, repetition.
Yeah, it's like, I played sports. I played soccer growing up, right? I played for a guy when I was young who he coached some big names, played on the American soccer team, played in D1. Like, all of his players played D1. And his thing was like, you don't get to be fancy until you never make a mistake on the basics, right? That's it. If you want to do fancy moves, then every single pass, every single shot, everything needs to be perfect. And so, like, I kind of see that in franchising is like, you want to get fancy with it, that's great, but you're not going to do it until you perfect the model that the franchisor has, and then put your own thing on it. But like, you're not Messi, right? You're a 5-year-old, right? You gotta learn the basics, before you can go be
Yep.
Messi.
Yep. That's such a good analogy. Was there a moment when you guys, so you're telling your wife, like, go sell, all right, go run the class, go do this. Was there a moment that you guys were like, this isn't for us, like, this isn't going to work out? Was there any of those like low moments, and how did you guys get through those?
So it's kind of crazy. Like, I always say, I wish my wife's first week wasn't as easy as it was. She closed like 6 or 7 schools in the first week. And so it's like, when we got to like 30 and she was doing like 1 school a week, she's like, oh, I'm so sad. I'm like, this is normal. This is like what everybody else does, like, so I would say that it wasn't bad. The hardest part actually came almost a year into it, when we went through our first summer. So we came in right before the summer. So all the kids who signed up knew they were going to be in it through that summer, right? So there was no dip. But all the kids leading up to this past summer, well, they go on vacation. They're 4 years old. They go to kindergarten. They do all these other things. And we had a greater than 50% drop off, right? And so we went from thinking we were like, the God's gift to this franchise, because we were growing, we were like one of the fastest they've ever seen grow, to being like not very good, right? And that was very hard, I think, mentally for my wife. It was a little frustrating for me, but like I'm not in it day to day, so I didn't want to like express that much. But we had a kid on the way. We're like, oh my god, this business just halved. Like, what is going on? Is it going to recover? The franchisor, all they're telling us is like, just keep going. And it's like, that's all they can tell us, right? But it's like, that's not helpful when you just lost, 200 plus kids. So I would say that was probably the hardest thing. We are back up. I think in less than a month, we'll be over what we were before the summer. But it was very scary for about 2 months. It was very scary.
Yeah. Was that part, I mean, is part of that now just expected? It's seasonal and that's just part of the game, or,
Yeah,
was it more than that?
it's seasonal, and then we know now to like we didn't even. It's like so stupid when you think back. It's like, duh, these kids are gonna they're 4, they're gonna turn 5, and then they're gonna leave. Because you're in a preschool, right? And it's like, why didn't we just check the number of kids who were 4 years old, right? It'd be a pretty good projection of who's gonna leave. And we
Yeah.
didn't do that. And it, like, of the kids who left, like 75% of them they just aged out, right? And it's like, oh my God, like that was so stupid that we didn't think about that. Um, but now we know, right? And you don't really know a business until you've been in it for 2 or 3 years. Even something that's
Yeah.
as simple as this. So
And remind me, do you have one unit open or a couple?
it's all mobile. We own 3 territories. So
Okay.
each territory is about 300,000. I don't know how we finagled this, but we ended up with 1 million people, and they called it 3 territories, right? They're good people, right? And so we concentrated in the first territory for like 6 months, and then the second territory for a few months, and then the third territory. But we run it as one big business because the teachers can go anywhere to teach. So
Yep. That's nice. So, okay, so you have 3 territories. Are you guys focused right now on, growing into additional territory and adding on, or are you still fine tuning,
No.
the 3 that you have today?
yeah, I think I think we're going to be at a little over 400 kids by the end of this month. I think the 3 territories could get to 1,000 in the model that we
Wow.
have. I think it's going to take 2 more years to do that, right? Which is fine. It's fine. So I'd like to do that. We have a manager. We just, like I said, we just finished training our salesperson. We're going to promote here in the next month or so a head of teachers, or like a head teacher. And then probably after that, bring in admin. And that staff should be good to like 700 or 800 kids. So we're kind of
Wow.
putting that in so that my wife can really focus on like the big events and like the direction of the business. So yeah, I think we're just we need to professionalize this. We need to get some of the not a lot of the franchise owners are this big, right? So we are kind of like making things up now as we go along, which is fine. I also have a business where I develop tech stacks for small businesses and marketing. So like I have all the back end to do it. Anyway, so yeah, we're just focusing on that, get to 1,000, and then we'll reassess, right? Do we want to sell the business? We don't want to live in Denver long term, right? So it's like, do we trust that this can be run without us physically here? Otherwise, because the cash flow is going to be really good at that point. But if we feel like it can't without us, then we'll sell it and move to somewhere else.
Yep. And what's the day-to-day look like now? I mean, like you said, your wife's kind of the GM. What's the division of labor for you two, and what does a day in the life look like for you guys?
Yeah. So, really, it's my wife running it, right? So, like, I do weekly. I check all the stats, all the KPIs. I have a pretty good model built out where I keep track of everything. I report everything to my wife and our manager every Monday, so they can adjust whatever their schedule is for that week. Our manager speaks to all of our teachers once a week on the phone. And so, like, if I notice somebody's dipping or their classes are dipping or they're adding, whatever, like, hey, tell them good job, tell them that they need to do better, like, whatever it is. I then I touch base with the salesperson twice a week. I was working a lot to train her, but now she's good. Um, and and then I do monthly P&Ls, right, where I go through and I see how it adjusted according to my projections and so all the financial stuff, strategy stuff, right? That's kind of me. And then my wife's really the one who runs the business, right? So she's overseeing the manager. She's overseeing all the employees. She's doing a lot of hiring. That's a big part of this business because they're all part-time folks and they come and they go. So right now she has to teach sometimes, which is surprising. But our manager's on vacation, and we have like 2 or 3 teachers who are sick right now because the winter's coming, right? So people are getting sick. So
Yep.
like we thought we had a barrier between her and the classes, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Um,
Uh-uh.
she was doing a lot of sales. She just finished selling. Again, I train all the like sales methodology and the calling, and my wife trained the in-person sales. Right, that's kind of like how we split that up. So she just finished training the salesperson, and that probably was half of her time until like this week. Right, she just finished training her. Um, so now her job is going to be looking forward to the recital in December. That takes a lot of effort to plan. We have really nice recitals, and so there's a lot that goes into that. So she's going to be focusing more on that, and then um, you can think of the business as like we have to talk to parents, we have to talk to schools, and we have to maintain the teachers, right? So we're the manager right now. We're trying to get her to be the main contact between um, the us and the teachers and us and the schools we've already signed. The salesperson is going to be the main contact between us and schools we haven't signed. And then between us and uh, yeah, so that's kind of the division of labor, and my wife just fills in whoever's needed.
Yep. And did you guys have that kind of mapped out from the beginning, or was it just, hey, we're also just learning as we're going here and figuring out what works and what doesn't?
Yeah, I mean we had plans, right? But like everybody's got a plan, until it happens. Uh, and so like we thought we had something really solid, and then our manager moves like 45 minutes into the mountains, and like now she can't cover classes, and we're like, well, okay, well, she's really good, so like we will change her role, and now we have to like promote somebody to fill in that extra gap. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you got good people, you don't want to let them go. They understand your business, they speak well to the teachers, they get along well with the culture. So like we're small enough where we can flex, where we want to
Hmm.
like if we want to keep you, we'll make it work.
Hmm.
Yeah. So like we're
That's
roughly,
nice.
I would say, in the plan, but there's been a lot of deviations as well.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of par for the course. Like there's a saying, it's like we make plans and God laughs, and you got to be able to adapt and pivot and deviate from that. Kind of coming down the home stretch a little bit on some of these, pieces of advice that you would give to others listening that might want to get into ownership, might want to get into franchising. I think the first question I want to ask is from your perspective, what do you think people tend to get wrong about franchising just in general?
Yeah. So all because it's called a franchise doesn't mean it's worth anything, right? I think that's like the biggest piece of advice is like there are all these guys out there and they have a half decent business and they decide that they're going to franchise it, and then now that they're a franchise because they paid a lawyer to fill out a franchise disclosure document, they get the allure and they're like, "Oh, it's a built-out system like McDonald's." No, it's not. It's garbage, and so I think all these guys get roped into these businesses that are garbage because it's just called a franchise. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of garbage franchises out there. And so what do you need to know to not go into a garbage business? Well, the first thing is a great business that's a bad fit for you is a bad business, right? So you need to get super clear on your goals, on what you're good at, what you want to do day to day, who do you want to interact with day to day. All this stuff matters, right? This is like, this isn't like you put money in and money comes out, right? Like you are going to work hard at this for 5 or 10 or maybe the rest of your life, right? Um, so it needs to be a really good fit. Um, and then you need to you need to be clear on your goals, right? So like that's like who you are and like what you're good at. But like there's no shame in having a business and you're an owner operator that works 20 hours a week and makes 200 grand, right? Like that's a
Hmm.
pretty good life. But you know, you get caught up in the internet and you're like, I want to own 100 and I want to make millions. And it's like, do you really? Like, do you want to put in the effort and the sacrifice and the, you know, the nightmares that it takes to get to that? You know, so like be really clear about your goals. And one type of franchise can do one thing, can't do the other, right?
Yep.
So I would say that's the next thing. Go all in. I think semi-passive is a joke, and it doesn't exist unless you have $1 million and you're really patient and you don't care about making a good return, or failing, which is probably what's going to happen. You have to go all in. This is a contact sport. And then I would say you need to have a thesis around the industry that you want to be a part of, around the type of support that you need from the franchisor, and what works in where you live, right? And then you find a franchise that aligns with those things. And then you talk to as many franchisees as possible, right? Talk to 10, talk to 20, like it doesn't matter. Just talk to a lot of them. And you don't have to talk to the ones that the franchise tells you have to talk to. You can talk to whoever you want. And hire an attorney to read the contract, and hire a CPA or a fractional CFO or something to help you with your projections, because most people don't understand financials.
Yep.
Think net profit is cash flow, and if you're like, I don't know what the difference is of those two things, like your projections are wrong. So just get somebody who knows, like a business owner. I think it was Ford. And they were like, you're an idiot. Like, how are you running such a big company? And he was like, I've got this magic box with buttons, and I can press the button, and I can have someone show up in my office who's the number one person in America at the thing, and then I just do what that person tells me, right? So it's like, you know, if that's how Ford thinks about being a business owner, like that's how you should too. I'm not good at financials. Don't go spend a semester learning financials. Hire some dude and pay him, you know, a couple $100 to build a really good model for you. Yeah, if all those things line up, then move forward, right? Like don't be like, if what you're doing right now isn't going to get you to what you want in life, it's not going to change by not getting a franchise, right? So it's like, you know, hike up your skirt and get through your fear and do it, right? And that's it. Like otherwise you're just going to regret it for the rest of your life.
Hmm. I think that, I mean, a lot of gold nuggets there. I mean, I think that's really good advice across the board on how to think about it, how to plan for it, how to surround yourself with the right people, which questions you need to start with, starting with why. I mean, a lot of really, really good practical, tactical, you know, tips that you just gave. I appreciate that. In that same vein, is there anything that you wish you would have known before you got started that was different than what you just said? Like, is there something that like even you didn't know? Like, you've been selling franchises before, you were in and around the franchise space, so you knew more than your average person coming in. So even for you, was there anything that, looking back on it, you wish you would have known as part of the diligence process, or questions you would have asked, or things you would have financed or structured differently? Like, what would you yourself have done differently?
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because there's like levels, right? And so like I'm sure to some people it sounds like I know a ton, but then like I talk to people and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything. Uh, you know, so hearing you say that, I'm like, it's like very strange. I'm like, what's this guy talking about? No, but you know, I think what I learned would be, I don't think I did as much financial planning as I could have, right? Um, I think I created like the normal like up and to the right graph, right, for the projections. So like that was part of the reason why that dip scared us so much. And you know, it's strange that nobody told that to me, right? So I think that's a good lesson of like, even though that happens to every franchisee every year, nobody brought it up in any of our validation calls, right? So like, you have to ask things. You have to be very specific about stuff. Um, yeah, and then yeah, I mean, once you like have a good franchise and you have a good model, at the end of the day, it's just gonna come to how hard you work. Like that's what it comes down to. You know what I mean? And I kind of knew that going in, And so like there's people who struggle in this franchise, and there's people like us who are crushing it. And ultimately, it's just down to like, are you working every single day as hard as you possibly can? And when something terrible happens, do you like, sulk about it for a couple days, or you just go, that's business, and you go out and you keep selling? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, research is only going to help you so much, right? It's like the franchise needs to be good enough. There's franchisees who have made X amount of dollars. Now it's up to you to go out and make that same thing, right? And they didn't do it by sitting around. They did it by working hard.
Yeah, you got to take action. Bringing it full circle. You shared before we started the episode with me that you've been working with a group of veterans, essentially getting into business, getting into franchising. If a veteran's listening to this episode right now, they're thinking about getting into a franchise. What advice do you have for that group specifically? Former military that are like, I'm trying to transition, or maybe they have transitioned and they're now just looking for that next thing and they're considering a franchise. What would you tell that group?
I would say that you're a lot more capable than you think you are, right? A lot of you guys get out and you're like, oh, I've never done anything in the private world. Well, that's where like the franchising fills in the gaps that you don't have, right? You have the leadership and the accountability and the discipline and the work ethic and the so on and so forth, right? That's not every veteran, right? Some veterans suck, right? But the most people out there, most of the, if I'm ticking the boxes, right? Like chances are, if you did hard stuff in the military, like you have more of that than 99% of people in the civilian world, right? I would say like because you trust people so much. I see franchises taking advantage of veterans more than anybody else, because in the military, like you couldn't just like lie to people, like but in the civilian world, like people lie to you all the time. Like I get lied to all the time, by vendors, by salespeople, by whatever, and so they take franchisors at their word. And franchisors lie, and especially some of the ones that advertise the hardest to veterans because they know that they can take them for a ride, right? So like you need to be a little bit cynical when you're talking to people, and you need an expert, right? So like, you can reach out to me, right? I'm happy to help. That's what my main thing is. I help people find good franchises, but like my main focus is veterans, right? So especially you guys, the way that I talk puts off a lot of people, and I know that, right? So like veterans tend to like the way that I, carry on. So I'm a good fit for those guys, right? But like even if it's not me, there's a million other veteran brokers. Franzi's got good info, but you need someone who's gonna like tell you that what you were just told was BS, right? Because a lot of brokers and a lot of people are gonna say like, oh no, for sure, just because they want the commission, right? So you need someone who's really going to help you through that, because you just haven't gone through that journey of being screwed over in the civilian world.
Yeah, that's really good advice, especially the first part about people are probably more capable than they think they are, and you got to have that belief in yourself. And getting the analogy I use is like I think business ownership is like probably what it feels like to a lot of people that are thinking about going to work out for the first time. Like it's intimidating. You go to the gym and there's these people that know what they're doing and they're jacked and they're so confident you doing all the exercises, and you're like, that's not me. I'm just going to not go. It's too much. But if you just show up and you do a push-up and then you leave, at least you like put your foot in, you did something, or next day do 10. Next day try a different exercise. And before you know it, like you're one of those guys or gals that you used to look at and be like, I can't do that. But with repetition and enough energy and effort, you can do it. And I think that advice you shared, whether you're a veteran or not too, is just like you're probably more capable than you think, and you just gotta Nike nailed it with their slogan. You just got to do it and get yourself out there and start getting the reps in.
Yeah, I mean that's a core belief of mine, right? Is that people can do way more than they think they can do, right? They just have these limiting beliefs, right? And this isn't like some woo-woo type of stuff. It's like our like innate tenant, like ability to think, and it's like it's what allowed us to be number one in the apex predator, right? Even though we don't have any claws or fangs. And every single one of us are way smarter, I think, than we give ourselves credit for. We just don't try because we're afraid to, right? So you just got to go out there, like you said, you go out there and you got to you got to try and you got to do it and you got to try a little bit harder tomorrow and go a little bit further the next day. And I truly believe that if more people push themselves, they wouldn't believe the things that they're capable of.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, there was this thing I saw. I think it's Elon says it's like take your 10-year goals and try to do them in the next year, and you'll be surprised. You're not going to accomplish it, but you're going to be surprised at how far you go if you shorten that timeline and you can push yourself beyond the limit you thought you had.
Yeah.
But Josh, this was incredible. Appreciate you sharing your story. Thank you again for your service to our country, for imparting your wisdom, your experience with those listening that either might be multi-unit folks already today, might be just exploring it now. Truly grateful for your time and appreciate you coming on.
Well, I appreciate you having me, and I had fun in the Marine Corps, so I appreciate you paying taxes. And, yeah, hopefully I'd love to see the success of Franzi continue to grow.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, Alex, thanks.